Welcome to Long Beach 2000. This is a public affairs program that examines issues of concern to our community. I'm Larry Allison, editor of the Press-Telegram, and joining us tonight are 7 distinguished panelists who represent a wide spectrum of views on this subject. Let's introduce our panelists. First, we have Tony Smith, probation supervisor, Los Padrinos Youth Detention Facility in Downey, who also teaches courses on probation at Cal State Long Beach. Jerome Torres, Hispanic member of the gang task force in the city of Long Beach, chairman of the task force. Father Al Scott of Our Lady of Refuge Parish, and who also served with the gang task force. Lawrence Binkley, chief of police, city of Long Beach. Keith Garrison, program organizer for Helpline Youth Counseling. Dr. Jose Lopez, a professor in Mexican American Studies at Cal State Long Beach, whose special area of interest is in gangs and gang activities. And Neil Hull, who is a leader of the Cambodian Association of America. Now, before we begin our discussion, we have a brief documentary produced by Dave Kelly. Here now is that story.
Probably the hottest issue in Southern California this year is gang violence and its association with drug trafficking. Many people fear that we're in danger of losing the war on the streets. Long Beach has its own gang problems, and those problems are a major concern for the Long Beach Police Department. Rock, snow, cocaine, white powder, whatever name you want to call it, it has dominated the gang scene the past few years and threatens to tear our society apart. Because of drug trafficking, the traditional roles of gangs are changing. Turf battles over real estate are being replaced by prohibition-style illicit profiteering. The 2 most powerful gangs in Long Beach are the Hispanic gangs known as the Longos and the black gangs mostly affiliated with the Crips. They come from different backgrounds. Hispanic gangs have a longer tradition and have not become as immersed in the drug trade as the black gangs. Lieutenant Al George of the Long Beach Police Department Gang Detail says both groups offer challenges for law enforcement.
There's different motivation for those 2 groups, those 2 gangs. In the Longos or the Hispanic gangs, they're motivated by territorial control. With the black gangs or the Crips, the motivation's profit for drug sales. And what we're seeing now is the Crips are expanding their areas, and they're moving into some of the Hispanic, which has been traditionally Hispanic areas. And they're moving into those areas. They view them as untapped sources for profit, where they can go out on the street and deal street-level drugs. Primarily cocaine's the problem.
Drug busts have dominated the media's attention to the crime problems currently tackled by law enforcement. Indeed, busts usually involve the most dramatic forms of arrest. However, there's another side to the gang problem which affects the quality of life in the inner city. Property damage and vandalism are the marks of the gang-affiliated Zorros. Spray paint graffiti is more than just unsightly. It also demands time and money to repair its damage. Some judges are experimenting with requiring youthful offenders to paint over gang slogans, but there doesn't seem to be enough paint or painters to keep up with the constant onslaught of graffiti. Residents who live in gang neighborhoods bear a special burden. Often trapped by circumstances or economic problems, they are unable to leave their environment, an environment that offers constant fear and intimidation.
The real victims of all this are the people who live in those communities. The people who don't subscribe to that gang activity, people who are not involved in it, but live in the community. And their life, their daily life, is affected by the activity of gangs on their street corners. The gangs move into an area, and especially when they're dealing drugs, when it's a profit motive thing, they'll move in and control the street. People that live in those areas are the real victims. Their freedom to move about is restricted. They're afraid to move about, especially at night.
For now, the police will continue their gang sweeps and high-visibility patrols. These are efforts which yield positive short-term results. Amidst all of the discussion about gang violence, one truth inevitably emerges. Police action alone will never be enough to solve the problem. The problem will have to be addressed on a community-wide basis. This is Dave Kelly for Long Beach 2000.
Thank you, Dave. Well, let's begin our discussion. And let's start with you, Mr. Smith. You are both a probation supervisor and a teacher on the subject at Cal State Long Beach, so you see the problems of gang activity and related subjects from both an academic and a very practical point of view. What special insight do you have that you could share with us tonight?
Well, I think one of the three things that have to be acknowledged about gangs of today is one is mobility. That the gangs that we have today are acknowledged to have spread out through the entire United States in every major metropolitan area, from Alaska to Atlanta to Washington, D.C. Second thing is weaponry. The gang fights of West Side Story, in which someone with a switchblade was considered the most fiercest of the members, has been replaced by those individuals with Uzis and MAC-10 weaponries. The last one is the money involved. The tens of millions of dollars in the drug trafficking that is now available for both the mobility and the weaponry. I think we have changed tremendously in our concept of gangs themselves.
Well, from your point of view, what do you think we should be thinking in terms of managing this problem or eliminating the problem, or something still different?
Well, I think one of the things that Dave Kelly said is it's a community difficulty. Most of us here on the panel tonight tend to react after a situation has occurred. We are a response to a problem. The community can only act rather than react. I think it's at that level that we're going to find maybe not a solution, but a method of easing the gang tensions and the problems that we have all experienced.
And how about your personal success level? What kind of luck are you having with people on probation who are members of gangs?
As a probation supervisor, it's difficult to encourage a young person to get a high school diploma and work for minimum wage, even if it was $6 an hour, when he explains to you that in one of his bad days he can make $10,000. And that is having other people work for him while he is sitting home watching television. If you're talking about competition, we lose out. We need to work on the responsibility of the individual. We need to work on the feelings that the individual has of him or herself, the self-concept.
Well, you're sure not going to win the argument on economic terms. So what is the crux of it then? Self-esteem? Is that what you're saying?
Self-esteem, I think, is one of the keys to working with any gang member, that they can feel just as powerful, just as elite without gang followers, being themselves, being something constructive rather than something destructive.
And incidentally, you mentioned the semi-automatic weapons. Jesse Jackson referred to the fact that young people can buy these weapons easily, without any delay even, at a shop on Long Beach Boulevard in Compton. What's your feeling about that subject? What should be done, if anything, about that?
I think a couple of things that Mr. Jackson did not touch on is that there are two new weapons out on the market that we all could go and buy tonight. One is a fully automatic weapon that holds 100 rounds of .22 caliber ammunition, and one is an automatic weapon that holds 100 rounds of 9mm ammunition. Most police departments carry no more than a 16-shot 9mm gun. The concept of having an Uzi or a MAC-10 to defend your home or to go hunting, or as one individual said, target practice, I think needs to be revisited with a realization is that these guns are not being used for those purposes, but rather to kill and maim other human beings.
Okay, Mr. Torres, what are your feelings? Now, you served as chairman of a task force examining the problems of gang activity and substance abuse. What's your feeling about weapons, as long as we're on that subject?
Well, as far as weapons are concerned, I believe that the only way we're going to get rid of the violence that prevails in the gang elements is tighter gun controls. I mean, children should not be allowed access to guns as freely as Reverend Jesse Jackson just mentioned the other night at the Democratic National Convention. Known felons should not be allowed access as quickly to these arms, and we need to put a stop to that. Now, that's a very controversial issue, what with the power of the National Rifle Association and their lobbying efforts. Who knows? It may be years that may come about, but without effective gun control, you'll never be able to stop the violence.
Now, how about the activities of your own task force? What is your sense of what you have accomplished and what ought to be done next?
Well, I'm sure you're aware, Mr. Allison, being the editor of the Press Telegram, when we submitted our report in August of '87, it created quite a controversy because at that time, we in the task force took to task our city officials for the fact that up until recently, it was the unofficial policy of our city fathers and mothers to deny that a gang problem existed. The extent of the problem that we have now in Long Beach, it just did not happen overnight. It's been festering for years and years and years, but now it's coming to a critical juncture. That was one of the things that we brought up. When we submitted our task force report, we outlined 3 principles to, if you will, embody all the recommendations in them. It was prevention in the form of education for parents and children, diversion in the form of job training, employment opportunities, recreational programs, and the such, and also suppression through just effective law enforcement. Up until now, it seems to be the policy of the city of Long Beach to again rely solely on the suppression aspect of solving the problem, in effect, law enforcement. And you just saw on the film clip that we've been having the gang sweeps. I'm not here to criticize that, but what I am critical of is that the city, again, has opted for the easy, quick fix solution to the problem. It's not going to cut it anymore. We need a community-wide, systematic effort to deal with it. If not, we're going to have this problem get worse and worse, and then Long Beach may end up becoming South Central Los Angeles, and that is what everybody wants to avoid.
Father Scott, you served on this task force.
Right.
Do you have the same sort of views and expectations, or do you differ in
No,
your
I
opinion?
agree with Jerome in general, and one of the things I feel that came from the task force was that people have lost respect for people. I mean, people become things. And I think that the thing I tried to promote in the task force meetings was that if people are not seen as special and as beautiful and as, you know, brothers and sisters to one another, we just use people and abuse them, and they don't agree with us, we get rid of them. So one of the things that I think we need to get back to, the basics, the value and respect for each person, young for the old, old for the young, rich, poor, whoever the person might be. And I think that's the key, one of the keys to look more deeply at the issue.
You know, Mother Teresa of Calcutta, you just reminded me, she talks about the evil that people can do in this life. She tends to look within herself for the similarities between herself and, let's say, a person like Adolf Hitler, rather than the differences. I think most of us feel more comfortable doing it the other way, distancing ourselves from people who are committing crimes and seeing that ourselves as being somehow different. What's your reaction to that? You deal with young people who are in trouble.
Right. It's funny that you were mentioning Mother Teresa. Our minds were very much in the same sound wave, because I was thinking of her a great deal. When she came to Long Beach a couple of years ago, her whole message was that of love, you know, and again of respect and of concern for the poorest of the poor. She indicated in the United States that we don't have the problem as much as they do in India. There are hungry people in our country, but she said people in our country are dying from the disease of loneliness, of feeling unwanted and unloved. And I think that many of these gang members are experiencing that themselves, and they're reaching out because their family, to the greatest, is not nurturing them as individuals and giving them what they need to get self-esteem and respect. They're going out in violence to achieve something that they're not getting from the deeper source themselves. Self-worth, self-esteem, and also their specialness.
Well, now tonight you have a very receptive audience.
Yes.
At least in this room. I'm not sure about all our viewers. But when you're dealing one-on-one with a young person who's active in a gang, let's say, and he's out on the streets, how receptive is he or she to that kind of message?
I think the hardest thing that I experience is that so many of the young people I deal with do not have a sense of self-worth. They feel they're just nothing to nobody. They can't seem to feel that they can get ahead. They feel like they've been pushed down for so long, for whatever reason, valid or invalid, that it's hard for them to all of a sudden reach out and say, I can do it. And again, referring to Jesse Jackson, as several have mentioned already, he kept instilling upon the young people especially, you can do it. Don't give up because you had a hard life, a hard background. Look at poor me, isn't it rough? I've been so misused. Yesterday's gone. We only got today. And I try to tell young people, you know, all the flowers of all the tomorrows are in the seeds of today. What you plant today, what you do, with your help and determination, with God's help, will go forth and make something worthwhile.
Well, Chief Binkley, I see you nodding your head. You've got an especially tough job. Talk about being on the streets. You and the members of your staff are there when the trouble's already happened more often than not. You do agree, though, with what Father Scott is saying, essentially?
You know, I agree with most of what he was saying. I feel very optimistic about the community getting together and working on gangs. I feel particularly optimistic about what the city's efforts have been in working with gang violence as it relates to the task force report. I feel good about organizations like those of Miriam Smith and Community Services that actually employ gang members and develop training programs for them. I feel pretty good about Tom Juni's support in the school board by having junior high programs that have assemblies and videotapes and handouts and identification and prevention of gangs. I feel good about the City Council's state grant to fund 3 people to work for the police department, and part of their job is to go out to the schools and teach them about gang preventions. I feel good about the City Council's acquisition and support of a program that will start in September that will be out in the junior highs to teach kids with an officer in the schools about gang violence. You know, if you put all those together and the support of the City Council in assigning a gang squad, and a gang squad now that goes out and identifies and apprehends gang members, and I agree that's the safety nets, that's the last resort. The society has failed when we get to that. But if you put all those efforts together, you're talking about the state and the community, and you're talking about the cities, and I think it's a major effort. But I think the real key is when it gets to that failure, it's not local government's responsibility alone. And one of the things I agree very strongly with on the Father is the real key to this sort of thing, not only gang violence, but narcotic prevention, is getting the community and the families to pay attention to the kids. But I think they can do that. I think the best analogy is, if you notice smoking in the last 20 years, community and education really made a difference there, and less people smoke, and a lot of people have stopped. And I think we can do that with gang violence, and especially with narcotics for the kids. So I feel pretty good. We've got a lot to do, but I think we're doing it.
Well, it sounds like that's another way of saying that you feel strongly that there's something going on in addition to suppression, even though suppression is a big part of your job.
Well, yeah, I think the city's supporting jobs and training. I think the city's supporting education in the schools, and I think it's supporting apprehension. So I think it fits right into what Jerome's saying. And we can do more, but I think it's a major effort that the city and the state are participating in, and these people in the community. And I feel pretty good. I think we're working on it. We can do more, but we're getting there.
Good. Mr. Garrison, you're out there working on it. What kind of luck are you having with your organization in reaching members of gangs?
Well, we've been in Long Beach for about a year and 2 months, and at first it was kind of a slow thing, slow uphill climb, but we've done some networking, like with Miriam Smith's program. Los Padrinos refers people to our program out in Bellflower. I just feel like that diversion kinds of things are something that's needed for the kids. I agree with Jerome. Suppression, I'm not sure about suppression. The natural feeling for someone is to want to belong to something, whether that be a gang, whether that be a football team, whether that be a family unit. I think that my job, or the job of the service providers, is to try to guide those gangs or those cliques or whatever you want to call them, and try to give them some positive direction.
Well, you know, getting back to what we were saying about Mother Teresa, it sounds like you're saying very much the same thing, that you see these are not different people who are involved in gangs. They're people very much like you and me. What you're saying, is that true?
They have again, as everyone said, self-esteem is a big problem. I think, you know, when I take kids out mountain climbing, and when they're 100 feet in the air, they're not afraid to be, you know, they're afraid. And they look down and they let you know they're afraid, and they cry, and they lose a lot of that, the inhibitions they have to show feelings. And when they complete that, they feel good about themselves. I think it's real important that the kids feel good. Self-esteem, a kid who's selling $50,000 worth of cocaine a year has a lot of self-esteem, has a big place in the community, and there's just no way around it. Our jobs are $3.50 an hour, $6.50 an hour, can't hit that person there. But I think if, again, the Long Beach schools have opened up their school system now for community-based agencies to come in. The DARE program that's set up, prevention, getting the peripheral kids. I think that there's those hardcore people that we're never going to touch. But there's the peripheral people that we can affect right now.
Well, what about the person who's making $50,000 a year dealing drugs? How do you reach a person like that? Or do
I
you
don't know
just-
that you do.
Yeah, maybe
Our
it's probably not
program
possible.
certainly isn't equipped to go out and do something with that kind of person.
And when you see individuals who are doing exactly that, what would you say, just based on your personal experience, is the likelihood somebody like that is going to end up in prison?
I would say 60%.
60%, sooner or later.
Yeah, sooner or later.
Do they appreciate that fact? Do they
I don't think
have
so.
a realistic sense of
I
that?
don't think so, and that's another thing. I don't think the kids are aware of what can really happen when they're out there and they're gangbanging and they're selling coke, and they end up in jail. It's like, oh, how did this happen? I don't think that the consequences. A kid who is out in a gang hasn't really dealt with a lot of consequences. His only consequences is, can he get him up? And when a system inflicts consequences on him, it's like, whoa, and then the parents are like, oh, wow, what's happening, So, I don't know. I don't think that person with 50,000, he'll get caught.
Yeah. In some cases, and I think this is understandable, in some cases, apparently, parents are kind of looking the other way when the kids are coming home with clothes and stereos and other things that they otherwise, they don't seem to have any way to be able to afford, and they're not making an issue of it. Is this your experience? Have you seen some of that?
Yeah, a lot of that.
What's your advice?
If it's funny because if you have a parent who's on welfare, a big thing with the gang people, single parent families, low socioeconomics, and you got somebody that's on welfare and their son's out hustling drugs and he's bringing in money to pay the rent. She's going to turn her back. She's going to, if he gets caught, he gets caught, but she's going to take that chance because she needs that subsidizing.
So what is your message to a parent in that kind of situation, or neighbors, or friends,
Most
or
of the
relatives?
parents in that kind of situation don't get to our program.
Yeah.
We're trying to put together some outreach where we're going out to people's homes. We're trying to involve parents in a lot of things. But the parents of those real hardcore gang kids, they never get to our agency.
Professor Lopez, you also bring a unique insight to our group. I know you don't mind my bringing this up because we talked about it earlier. But even though now you're a distinguished professor at Cal State Long Beach, when you were a very young person, you were imprisoned for dealing in the sale of marijuana. And I think you said earlier that at that moment you thought your life was over. Well, fortunately for all of us, it wasn't. But what useful insight can you bring to this problem based on your personal experience?
Well, the feelings of helplessness, of having the world come to an end, as I mentioned before, give me a different approach to the problem. And that is one of more compassion, of trying to find out exactly what the kids are feeling and how they interpret their world. As I view the problem, I've been studying this thing for I've been really studying it very, very hard for about 3 years. And even though I've been associated, with the research for quite some time, but the message that we got from Sacramento, out of the governor's task force on gangs, was all the same, basically the same, that gangs are a problem, that we have to do something to curtail their particular activity. There is no money available for research to find out what the gang members themselves feel about their world. Questions that we may have are, why do gang members empower themselves through violence or through the usage of drugs? The only thing that we have is our view of the world, the way we see the world. One of the couple of panelists mentioned the large amount of money that is being made in drug dealings. If we were in another economic sector of our society, we would be praising. In fact, we might even be asking questions as, how did you do it? What are your management techniques? What are your marketing techniques of getting this particular product out? Instead, of course, it's the complete opposite. So my feeling is that we have pumped in a lot of money, and of course the chief knows maybe I'm in the wrong business, because right now the money is in suppression. The money is in putting a lid on the problem. Unfortunately, 10, 20 years from now, the problem is going to increase even larger. With the overtime that we had in the Los Angeles Police Department, the monies came in, they were available. Very rapidly there were monies there. This made the chief look good in Los Angeles. He was able to provide money for his employees to buy Christmas presents, say, when Christmas comes around. Now, when we ask for money to try to bring in programs for employment, it's like pulling teeth. When we ask for money to do research in this particular field, it's just not available. And our institution is not going to give us the money to do the research unless, again, it is doing something that is within line of the general public. And right now, the research money is going to how do we develop methods to put a cap on the problem rather than trying to understand the youth. And I think that probably the Prophet Kahil Gabral had it best when he was asked about children. And the women asked him, she says, what can you tell us about our children? He says, your children come through you, not for you. For theirs is the world of tomorrow, a place that you will not be able to visit, not even in your dreams. Unfortunately, we try to make our children like us. And I don't think that we're very good examples. So I think that the best thing for us to do is to try to understand them and prepare them so that they can take on the challenge of tomorrow.
Neil Hall, Mr. Neil, we were chatting informally earlier this evening. You compared the streets of some of our neighborhoods in Long Beach to the jungles of Cambodia. You have a very practical problem in your neighborhood and with your... What do you think of what's been said so far this evening?
I think everything has been said. Short-term suppression, diversion, education. I think everything has been said. And a lot of money have been spent on that. My own viewpoint is that together with this, the short-term solution to just cap, like Professor Lopez just said, to cap the problem, we also need to revise the social values of this country. Otherwise, and also take care of the prevention rather than wait till the problem have gone up and then intervene later. You spend 10 times more money than prevention. What I think is that we go back to the family unit and give credit to the parents. Let the parents do the job. Discipline their children. They are young. And then also to the teachers. Then the next 20 years and instill their self-esteem, love. I don't know whether it's very controversial in our society right now where the father and mother have to go to work and let the children in child care, and they don't receive enough love and warmth and security. What do I suggest? Maybe impossibility. But that's the key to the problem. Family, education.
How about the immediate problem? You said that your dream would be to be able to walk safely on the streets of Long Beach in your neighborhood. What you were suggesting a moment ago seems to have to do with the core issues and the long-term problem. Let's get into that in just a minute. We need to take a break first, but we'll be back in just a moment. Well, we're back to resume our discussion of drugs and gangs. I'm Larry Allison, editor of the Press-Telegram, and we're with a group of 7 distinguished guests this evening. Mr. Neal, we were talking with you about love and the core issues, but also a very practical problem. When you go home tonight, your neighborhood is not one of the safest in Long Beach, and you were saying that you'd like to feel safe when you step outside your car tonight.
Sure. I like to feel like we are really in a city, not in a jungle. Like to, if in a warm night like this, take my kid and my wife strolling down the street without being mugged or without being bothered by gangs or by bums. That's great. It's we love it. I think everybody else do too, but how we can do about it? We need all that we can get. Collaboration, cooperation from the police down to the community, to the service providers. No more fingers pointing. Don't point any finger that the police don't do the job, the community just lazy, not report the crime. We got to have a good cooperation within the community and service providers and also the police. Also, we got to have a really good cooperation from the federal level down to the state, to the county, and to the city. Otherwise, that problem will be increased, and the next 10 years is going to be out of hand.
So would you like to see, practically speaking, more police on the street in your neighborhood?
Yes, I do.
Many more? A few more?
Well, more, but also wise use of the police too. You mean cost effective, not if you have 2 more policemen, and then you will have too many that some of them don't do the job.
But you think
I like to see more police on the street. You know.
That's your job. Leaving, I realize you don't want to deal with policy. That's a separate subject. But leaving policy and other considerations aside, ideally, how much bigger police force could you use practically and efficiently?
Generally, you gauge police departments by numbers of police officers per 1,000. We have just about 1.5, maybe 1.6 officers per 1,000. I think just to do that efficient job that he's talking about, I think you need 2 policemen per 1,000, which is not a lot of policemen. That's about in the middle of cities of our size. So that would give us somewhere between 160 and another 200 officers, which I think would be adequate. But I think you have to do a couple of things. I think you need some more police in the city of Long Beach right away. But I think what you're going to have to do is what we talk about. There's going to have to be a total effort. You know, a police officer is a short-term effort. We can go out and stop a crime tonight, and we need to do that. We need to have more policemen to do that, stop rape, robberies, and pillaging tonight. But long-term, we need some academicians. We need this group here to do some things that have job placement, have education programs that really can term long-term. Because we can keep adding police, but if the community and these groups don't get together, you're going to have to quadruple the size of the police department. Pretty soon you can't pay for that. So I think what I'm saying is in agreement with all these gentlemen, we really have to do a lot of things. We need more police, and we can do those things tonight, tomorrow, and this year. But for the long term, we need to find out the causes of crime and gang violence and go from there. So I feel pretty good about that. I was kind of feeling real optimistic yesterday. I got to meet with some prominent community leaders who wanted to gain some funds for us, and Ray Grabinski and Whitey Littlefield and Tom Stewart and the Board of Realtors in Long Beach, who were there just to find out how we could generate some funds for youth programs that do the long-term thing of education and prevention. And I really felt good about that. So if you look at that, and you look at these gentlemen here, and you look at the courts in the state, and I think everybody's starting to work. And I think more important than all of these people is if, as the father said, if you can get the parents to pay attention to their kids. We talked to, and we kind of chuckle, one of the things we both talked to the community about is if we could get them to spend 30 minutes with their kids once a day, we could preclude gang violence.
While we're talking to you, Chief, how do you feel about these semi-automatic weapons, actually, which can be converted to automatic weapons very easily? There are a lot of them out there, and they're selling very well. The National Rifle Association is opposed to any form of gun control. What are your personal feelings about that? Is that a concern
Well,
to
you know,
you and your department?
Officers are very concerned about the weaponry on the street, although when we talk about gun control, I think two things. One is, that's not for a chief of police to decide a political issue like that. I'll support whatever the community wants. But on the other hand, it's already against the law to rob, rape, and pillage. So if you make it against the law to carry guns, that's not going to solve the problem.
Okay. Yes,
Larry,
Father?
one of the issues that I'm very concerned about, and in the last 21 years of my life, I've been teaching religious studies, and currently I'm teaching St. Anthony High School and dealing with morality and social justice. And I'm convinced that religious leaders, teachers, and parents must get back to the basic moral values. They have to teach those, and in a sense, more than just teach them and say, this is your lesson, this is your homework, they have to live them. And it's incredible because so many kids today have no sense of responsibility for their actions. They just do things, and they don't realize when you walk across the street against the light, you may get hit and killed. I mean, you just can't do something that's going to happen. So I really feel the accountability for actions, the responsibility for themselves, and also as leaders and as teachers and as parents and whoever we might be, we've lost a sense of quietness in life. Everything is rush and hurry. We live in the superficial level of life. We don't stop and ask, who am I? Where am I going? What's life all about? And unless you have basic questions like that, I mean, you just run around making laws and having the workshops and all these other things. But the fundamental thing is, who am I? What's life about? And what am I doing to make life?
Well, now, you've been personally involved with parochial schools,
Right.
Catholic schools, where of course these issues are dealt with, they're taught.
Right.
And that's the reason I think probably you're seeing increasing numbers of people who are not Catholic sending their kids to parochial schools.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is, that's a very tiny portion of the school population.
Right.
How would you have a public school deal with these issues? To teach them in a broad sense?
Yeah, the broad, certainly justice, right and wrong, you know, truth, goodness, the value of the human being. The values I found in literature across the board, you know, especially in English classes. It's just so important we get back to those. The superficiality of life is so prevalent. We live just, you know, on who's got this car, and let's get this music, let's get run around and do this. But to sit down and just spend a few minutes looking and saying, who am I, you know? What's the real essence of my being on this planet? Do I want to give a contribution to this planet, leave a legacy when I die, or just take from people, use people, and when they keel over and it's all over? So I see that kind of as a very fundamental, core, basic thing to the whole issue of...
Well, while we're on fundamental issues, poor neighborhoods have always been tough neighborhoods. I mean, that's been true for centuries. London was a pretty tough place 500 years ago, and in some neighborhoods it still is. How much of that is really a change? Is that, should we maybe not be cynical about it, but should we be realistic, let's say, and say that this is just a problem that's always been with us and always will?
No, I don't agree with that supposition. First of all, let me just say right off the bat, is deploying more police, I don't think is going to really deal with the problem. Yes, you can probably maintain it, manage it for a little while, but it's not going to do anything. My whole point is this, is that, and this was brought out in our task force report, only 10-15% of the total gang population commits over 80% of the total crimes, okay? And then also to look at the other aspect of it, when you talk about gang problems, Mr. Allison, you're talking about a minority youth problem. 95% of all gang kids are minorities. 55% of them in Long Beach are Hispanic. 33% of them Black. Now, why is it these kids are joining gangs as opposed to Anglo kids? Simple reason. It is socioeconomic. It is political. How can you expect a young Latino or Black child to say, hey, get away from gangs, get away from selling drugs, when that person from the time that they were born never was given the opportunities as their counterpart, the Anglo kid? They have been alienated from the educational institutions. They've been alienated from every authoritative figure in society, starting from the police all the way down to their parents. Now, when they've been told from the beginning that they have no future for them as far as career, no future for them as far as gainful employment, no future for them as far as a livelihood, what do you expect these children to do? Naturally, they're going to respond. And how they're going to respond? Well, it's like an animal. When you back an animal into a corner, what's the animal going to do? They're going to fight their way out, and they're going to tear everything in sight just to get free. And this violence that you're seeing really is a manifestation of that frustration, that alienation, that sense of self-worthlessness. But it is something that has been inculcated into these children's minds. It just wasn't lying out there for them to take up.
That's a very articulate explanation for what's happening. But what should we do now beyond the explanation?
What Jerome is saying right here is not just unique to the minority community. I mean, this value system is being communicated to the public at large. We live in a society where economics is the main issue. Father pointed out that perhaps we should look at some of the social issues. The social structure here is different. The very basics of American political system is based on an adversary system. The police department is in an adversary role vis-a-vis the community. Now, we have talked about it before as to how could we change these things. Well, if the administration has one point of view, all right, we've talked about this before. What is the makeup of the ethnic makeup of the administration? And we're talking about lieutenants and above in the Long Beach Police Department. Do we have any minorities in that particular area? If so, then we would have direction. But if the top brass is all white, and we have a problem that deals with minorities, we can't expect that type of direction coming from above. The chief is going to need some help, or he's going to have to bring in some people at that particular level. Again, what our society is doing is communicating to us that there is this social value or the social underpinning of an adverse society. Now, how do we blend this thing? How do we bring the community in line? Because the police should not be the enemy of the community. Right. I mean, they should be there to serve, and it's understood. It should be understood that the police are there to serve. But instead, when you come to the minority community, you see it as they are here to enforce the law, or they are here to get us in trouble. How do we communicate that to our community that we need a more positive relationship? And that is, again, has to do with bringing in some top brass. I mean, do we have people who are aware of our problem, who are non-white, within top administration in the police department?
Mr. Neal, you wanted to say something about that?
Well, I think community, we talked about it. There are good guys and bad guys too. There are some community, like our communities right now, really are helpless. One, because traditionally we came from a country that got a central government, and we fear the authority, be they police or security guard. When you got in uniform, we're afraid of them. But since we are over here and we are kind of new in a strange land, and we don't know, we are afraid of everybody, even our neighbors. And we are also afraid of bad guys. And the police are so far away, once in a while they come over. But what we have been victimized most by bad guys on the street. So it's a little bit, I don't know what to say. We need police. We don't like the police brutality, but we also need police protection for, helpless guys like us.
Oh, for sure, Mr. Hall. I mean, I empathize with Chief Binkley very much. I mean, he's here to maintain law and order, and he has a very difficult job. But my whole point, and Dr. Lopez pointed out, is very apropos. The power structure here in Long Beach, Mr. Allison, and you know it because you're part of it, is predominantly Anglo and male. Now, if that power structure had some brown faces, some black faces, some yellow faces on that, I guarantee you we would not have the prevalent gang problem here in the city of Long Beach today. But unfortunately, we don't. We need that sensitivity in those key decision-making roles. Otherwise, again, even though we do have some programs in the prevention diversion, when you look at it relative to police, These programs, we're talking about operating on a nickel and dime budget, and nobody knows that better than Mr. Keith Garrison right here.
Well, should we separate this? Could we separate this, do you think, into two problems? There certainly are problems that are racial in nature. That I think we can all agree to that. But isn't there a separate problem? Because if you look at crime going back, I mean, literally centuries, in the city of Paris, where everybody has the same color skin, more or less the same ancestral history, or the streets of London, or wherever, you do sometimes, you do almost always, find violent crime in the areas where there's deprivation and poverty. So isn't that also true?
I'm sorry.
I think it's a question of commitment. You know, there's so many short-term programs that happen. There's the short-term sweeps. It's consistency. You try to teach it to parents. Be consistent with your kid. Discipline your kid. Don't do it once or twice and let it go. The kind of programming that we do, funding is set up for short-term programs, 90-day programs. You got a kid who's got 16 years of crime behind him and put him into a program for 90 days and it's supposed to change his life around? You know, give me a break.
Larry, I'd like to take issue with the comments about the police department for a couple of reasons. One is the guarantee that there wouldn't be any gang violence if we had minorities in the power structure of the police department is really kind of ridiculous. I replaced a fellow who was a black, and he had a black command staff, very strong, hard leaders who are still there, and we still had a black gang problem. You can't just terminate a bunch of people in the power structure and say we're going to bring them in by minorities. What you do is what we have done in the community, and we established an Asian advisory group and asked them to help us hire some Asian police officers. We've aspired a Hispanic group that these people are involved in. We've asked them to help us hire Hispanic officers. We've established a black advisory group and tried to get some people also as police officers and in the power structure that you want to call it. But the connotation that we haven't done anything and that we should get rid of some people just because they're Caucasian is ridiculous.
Oh, no, Chief, we're not implying that, and please let me say that, you know, for Dr. Lopez, because I know he wasn't implying that as it relates to the police department. But the thing is that the police department is an apparatus. It is an apparatus of key decision-making at the top above the police department. What I'm saying is that the city fathers and mothers, the ones who really call the shots here in Long Beach, what I'm saying is that a big problem with the gang situation in Long Beach is that there has not heretofore been an investment in our minority youth, and that has got to take place. Demographically, look at all the studies of the Long Beach Unified School District. The minority youth population in this town is accelerating by leaps and bounds. If we don't tackle the gang problem now, because it is a minority youth problem, it's going to manifest, it's going to get worse. And that is what the point that I'm making, Chief, is that we got to make your job better, easier.
Well, I agree with you on that point. I think we really ought to have some prevention programs that deal with education and taking care of minority youths and other youths. I agree.
Two things that come to my mind is, one, this is the same conversation I had back in 1969. When we talked about the Hispanic problem in one of our cities, and we said the same things that everybody's saying here today. And I want to go back to what Mr. Garrison said. Commitment does not show color. Caring, love, respect, responsibility does not show a white face, a black face, a brown face. What I have seen in working with gangs since 1968 and 69 is a lack of long-term commitment. It amazes me that we can plan to go to Mars and spend $10 billion on something we will do 10 years from now, but we cannot project 5 years from now that we want to commit X number of dollars, X number of hours of manpower into a problem we all acknowledge that can touch us anytime, any place if we live in the United States. There's not a single one of us that cannot be touched by gang violence today as we go home, tomorrow, the next day. Commitment, I think, programs I have seen, such as a program called RAISE, Reaching Adults and Youth Through Success, which was a parent effectiveness training program, a job referral program, an education program, no longer exists because the governmental money ended 1 September. Mr. Garrison knows fully well being on a purse string and hoping that you exist in October every year.
Well, Mr. Smith, we're beginning to run out of time. Why don't you take this moment, and we'll let each of our panelists do the same thing, to think for a minute about what we've been talking about and the problems and some of the conversation that hasn't changed much in the last 10 years or 20 years or whatever. And then tell us what you feel most strongly about and what you would like to communicate to our viewers tonight. I mean, some of the issues that we have barely touched on are, of course, personal responsibility and accountability. What would you like to see people do about these problems?
Where do I start? I think we could spend 3 days here talking just amongst ourselves. I think it needs to be a concerted effort. It needs to be our educational facilities from universities, colleges. I don't think we need to start in junior high school and educating minors about gangs. We need to start in grade school. We need to educate parents. We need to change our perspective of what is important in this society: immediate gratification or long-term respect and self-esteem. The things that we've been talking about, a lot of things we're talking about, suppression, studies, are very short-term. It's going to take a long investment. Unless we invest now, and I have seen the gangs worsen in the last 20 years, in the next 20 years, we will probably be wearing flak vests if we go out to the liquor store, carrying our own guns, and we may not go out by ourselves. We may, all 7 of us here, or all 8 of us, we may have to go out together to make sure at least some of us come back with a loaf of bread and milk.
Mr. Torres, what do you have to say about that?
Well, first I want to say that I am not a naysayer. I mean, when you look at the efforts that come about presently as compared to the past, we've come a long way, but we have to go farther. The new proposal that's before the City Council that was submitted by Mayor Kell regarding the Office of Education, I feel really embodies the best of the task force report. If we empower that office, make it a super czar that's being talked about like in the federal government to deal with gangs, with drugs, I really believe that we will achieve on a much broader scale, a much greater magnitude, many of the things that we want to achieve in dealing with the problem.
Father Scott?
Yeah, I have been very blessed with having probably the greatest father in the world, who was also a Superior Court judge, and more specifically, when I was growing up, the presiding judge of the juvenile court in Los Angeles. So I never fooled around. But at any rate, my father, in his talks, continually stressed to the parents, you have got to work with your kids, love your kids, and spend time with your kids. And for those parents especially who are listening, I urge you, don't sell yourself short by saying, I don't know what their world is so different than mine, whatever. You've got to go to workshops, you got to read, you got to listen, you got to be there for those kids because you do something that a priest can't do, clergy can't do, teachers can't do. No one can do what you can do because you're the parents. They need you, they love you, you got to work as a team.
Chief Binkley.
You know, I feel good. You notice there's a lot of feelings in this group, some very heated discussions at times, but I think that's healthy. I feel optimistic about all of these people working on this problem. I think of the community people that I've talked about. I think of the City Council is strongly supportive of doing some things in this effort, long-term and short-term. The city manager, the mayor's involvement, the governor's support financially and politically. If you look at all of those things and you put them together, I think we're doing pretty doggone good. And I feel good about that. And I'm glad to see the police department out there doing their job, and I'm glad the schools are doing their job. So I think we started, and I'm glad to see everybody is intense about this and helping us so we can put our gang officers out of a job. And I think we're going to do it.
Mr. Garrison.
I think that, again, the long-term commitment, I know that we're doing the job now, but will we be doing it for 5 years? I think that it's historical that when you get the Band-Aid on it and you stop the blood and you stop the guts, everybody forgets about the problem, and it'll resurface again. I think we have to have a long-term commitment. We've got to work together as community people. You've got people all vying for the same money, and we're demonstrating territorial kinds of things too, because I want that $20,000 so my program can run, and I don't want Jerome's program to run, because my way is the right way. You know, I think we got to use each other, and we got to network, and we can't be afraid to go to the police station and say, hey, this and this and this is happening in the community. You know, we've got to work together. We've got to interface.
Okay. Professor Lopez.
A word about our history going back. Let's not forget that in Europe, in Spain, the gypsies were blamed for all the problems there. In the 1940s, the zoot-zooters were blamed for even the usage of material, and the zoot-zoot was during the wartime of austerity, right? And so let us not forget that now we are looking at gangs, and we are beginning to see that perhaps gangs are endemic to the minority community. This is not true. In the Orange County area, for example, in the past year, there were 10 new skinhead, Nazi-oriented gangs. All of our youth have problems, and the only way we're going to find out what the bottom line of the problem is to do research, and we need the money to do the research. We have excellent people, but they have to make a living too, and we have to get that research out.
Neil Hall.
Well, I give about moral values, give authority back to the parents and to the teachers. And now you spend a lot of money in intervention, because right now you talk only about Hispanics and black gang. You forget about the Asian, the Cambodian over here, right, that your neighbors, they're going to follow suit if you don't prevent it right now. I'd like to see a program reaching them and preventing them from follow suit.
Well, that's about it for this evening. You've heard some of the things that, if you were listening, were said 20 years ago, and some of them sound the same. But you've also heard some passion and some conviction that the real issues are that people who are involved in gang and drug activities are really more like you and me and us than they are unlike us, and that the real issue, perhaps not short term but long term, are values. And I think you picked up a few ideas from our guests tonight about what you personally can do at home and in our community to help resolve these problems. Thank you for being with us. We hope you'll join us again for other segments of Long Beach 2000.